looking from the outside in, people who are getting upset at the fact that you're making comedy at these situations, to me, that is potentially the most shocking thing of all. Because Armando Iannucci must be itching at his script to have a go at Brexit and Boris Johnson with another season of The Thick of It. And there must be, I
think he said he could never do The Thick of It again. There was an article a couple of years ago because he says things have got too surreal.
Well, there we go. But do you know what I mean? Like, to me, it looks like the perfect breeding ground. The current political climate is the perfect breeding ground for some comedy and some satire.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's ideal. People often say that to me, like, isn't it hard to satirize? Like, people like Trump, who is self-satirizing. The funniest things said about Trump are by himself, right? They're on his Twitter feed.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, I mean, 2 days ago with Tlaib, you know, the thing about Rashida Tlaib, sorry, I'm talking politics again, but she'd asked to go to Israel to visit her 90-year-old grandmother on humanitarian grounds, and Israel had denied her entry because she was likely to criticize the Israeli government. And she said in a letter, I won't criticize you. I just want to see my grandmother. They came back saying, okay. And then she was like, oh, this is disgusting. I'm not going there because they're demanding that I say certain things. It was a total political move. But then Trump tweeted about it saying, well, the only winner in this situation is her grandmother who won't have to see it. Let's be honest, that's a funny tweet. Now, look, I don't support Trump, and I'm also I'm old-fashioned about politics. I don't want my politicians to be funny.
Yeah.
I want them to be serious because it's a serious job.
Yeah.
But I can look at that and say, that's funny. I can look at that and say, that's a funny tweet. He has a point, even though I don't like most of what he stands for.
Wish I'd written it.
Yeah, there we go. That's not that good.
Yeah.
But it's funnier because it's the president.
Yeah.
There is something funny about the idea of the president of the United States calling Kim Jong-un fat. That's funny because it should never happen. It's also scary because they're both nuclear powers. You know, so the stakes are pretty high.
Both of them have got a button.
Yeah, stakes are pretty high there. So again, I should reiterate, I'm not supportive of it. I wish he didn't do it.
Yeah.
But I also look at it and laugh. What are you going to do? Laughter's an involuntary response, isn't it? I don't calculate like the woke set seem to be able to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the woke idea is that you hear a joke, you think about it, you assess who are the marginalized groups. Is it punching up? Is it punching down? Can I laugh at that? Yes, good. Emit laughter. They see it as this kind of transaction, right? That's not how it works. Sometimes I laugh at the most horrible, inappropriate things because they are horrible and inappropriate. Because that sort of stuff reminds us why we don't talk about those things. You go and see a Jerry Sadowitz show, you know, and good luck watching a Jerry Sadowitz show and not being offended at some point.
Yeah, everyone's going to get offended.
He's going to offend you at some point. There's going to be a moment where you think, that's too much. You shouldn't do that. And that's there's something quite exhilarating about that.
Yeah.
You know? You can be offended and laugh at it. Happens to me all the time. I'm quite sensitive. I get offended really easily. But it's my problem. It's basically.
Yeah, that's funny. One of the things that I've been thinking about when seeing the way that we recently had Zuby on the show.
Yeah.
Because of this weird game playing that the left's done with language and social constructs and things like that.
Yeah.
To me, what it appears to have allowed are very clever people to game that system.
Right.
And Zuby's tweet about breaking the woman's deadlift record, P.S. I identified as a woman, don't be a bigot.
Yeah.
That is a perfect example of regaming the little gaps that have been created by the left in that.
Yeah.
Is that one of the things that you think that is helping us to identify where there's inconsistencies within their views and stuff like that?
I think ridicule is what does it best of all. And part of the way you do that is you take on board their language. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is you find yourself tempted to play them by their rules. So when they talk about privilege and all, I've seen this happen a lot. When there's an argument about privilege, and they often throw out this idea of white privilege, this blanket idea that if you're white, you are inherently privileged, which of course is not true. Some white people are privileged, some aren't, right? In all sorts of ways. There's all kinds of ways you can be privileged, right? It's not just to do with race, ethnicity, and sexuality. But yeah, so you end up with the situation where people buy into the victimhood thing, and they'll say, okay, I've been accused of being privileged, so how can I come back and say, actually, no, I went to a rough school, grew up on an estate, I did, right. And then you're getting into this competition, you're playing their rules back at them, and that's probably not healthy, you know? You can do it, like you can, and when they fall foul of their own rules, which they often do, right? Did you see the Democrat conference in America where someone made a point of personal privilege, yeah?
Yeah.
And the point of personal privilege was, guys, can you just keep the noise down because I'm very sensitive. I get sensory overload and I get triggered. Then someone said, point of personal privilege about that point of personal privilege. Don't say guys, that's gendered language. I'm really offended by that. Don't do that. So you have people calling out each other's calling out. It's like this endless inception of wokeness.
Yeah.
Right. So we could do that too. So we could point out where they are being triggering. I mean, let's take an example. Most of the woke lot who are really anti-Brexit tend to be incredibly ageist. They're basically saying, we can't wait for the old people to die. Old people have fucked over the country. They're basically evil. It's like, are you kidding? You're the person who goes on all the time about being sensitive and surely what ageism is part of that, isn't it? Or is that just your blind spot? So then if we call them out for ageism, we become part of that game.
Yeah.
So I sort of refuse to play the game.
So that's something that I've got written down here as something that I totally can't work out, but you're going to help me do it.
Okay.
You may have been in a relationship, but a lot of listeners will have been, where your partner brings up a particular issue. You don't care about this issue.
Okay.
That you spoke to that girl, or you didn't reply in time, or you were late, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's not an issue that you usually would do, but they set a precedent by doing that.
Yeah.
And then what you find yourself doing next time that something happens that you find them culpable for that same thing for, is you go, hang on a second, are you talking to that guy?
Yeah.
I didn't care, and I still don't care, but I'm going to use the opportunity to identify your inconsistency.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Straight off the bat.
Yeah.
And that push and pull
that
happens in relationships, I think, is very similar to what's happening here.
Yeah.
And I almost think that looking at the way that the left has kind of adopted this, the way that Andy Ngo was assaulted in the street and they're taking bike lots around and throwing milkshakes at people, that would have been a characteristic of the right previously.
Oh, absolutely.
A very aggressive approach.
Right.
And it's almost like they're taking on that persona, that push and pull thing. And then you think, well, hang on a second, if you keep on doing that as the left and throwing bike locks around, there are some people on the right who have got very, very large guns.
Right, exactly. Well, there's two sort of points there. I think one of them is well, actually, not just the left that do it. Of course, the right do it as well. We saw that with the Joe Brand case. When Joe Brand made the joke about throwing battery acid at Nigel Farage, which was obviously a joke, whether you found it funny or not, that's irrelevant. But it was mostly people on the right saying she should be arrested for that, or she should be investigated by the police. All the same people who complain about the very authoritarian treatment of comedy on the whole, right? And people who say that free speech is under threat. And then all of a sudden they're the people saying, actually, no, but Joe Brand should be investigated because that's the inciting violence. No, you've got to be consistent in your principles, either left or right. That's really, really important because it means your own principles will get undermined. But the other point about Antifa, which the group, the anti-fascist group. Now, I, for one, mistrust anyone who identifies as anti-fascist. Let me just say that. Because for a start, I assume everyone is, right? My assumption of you will be that you're not a fascist. Yeah? It's a fair assumption, right?
Yeah.
Okay? I will assume that of everyone until I hear extraordinary evidence to the contrary. If I find the evidence, fine.
Yeah.
But we have to, because there's hardly any fascists out there.
It's like being an anti-dog shagger.
Yeah, exactly. You don't declare that, do you?
Yeah.
You don't declare that you don't have a predilection to penetrate livestock, do you? Do you? I don't know. No. And I wouldn't assume that you would have.
Yeah.
Although now we're talking about my suspicions. No, you see, but look, and I see it on Twitter all the time, proud anti-fascist. Like, you don't need to tell me that. And it makes me suspicious. Right?
What you're projecting about.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same as the people who... There's a statistic somewhere that Yusuf, one of the co-hosts of the shows, put out. Yeah. People that are very, very sort of vitriolic about being against gays are the ones that are most aroused when they see...
Yeah, there's been studies into that. Yeah. There's been studies. I mean, they literally measured the extent of people's arousal.
Yeah.
To like how hard they got, basically. Yeah. And it tended to be when the most overtly homophobic people watched gay porn. It's such a no-brainer. Of course it is. Because why would you care?
Yeah.
Why would you care who people
Unless
have sex with?
There's something lurking in the back of...
Yeah, it's the data's in on that one. And it's not surprising. But the point about Antifa, Antifa effectively end up behaving like fascists, don't they? They end up behaving like...
That's the thing that's so funny about it.
Yeah. Like anyone who seeks to silence someone through violence is at the very least employing a tactic that the fascists also employed. So, I'd probably stop short of calling them actual fascists. I think fascists has a very specific historical meaning, but they're certainly fascistic tendencies or strategies. I mean, I read Mark Bray's book about Antifa, and what's very interesting, it's very well written, actually. What's interesting about it is he does a very good job of sort of outlining all the history of the anti-fascist movements. Things like Cable Street, you know, where the people confronted the Oswald Mosley's brown shirts. So all of that, and that's very good. There's a lot of that stuff I didn't know about. It's all very interesting. But of course, those are genuine anti-fascist movements. You know, these are
not the kiddies version,
right? Exactly. So what the book fails to do, quite spectacularly actually, is connect those movements to what is happening now, and makes the assumption that the people we're dealing with are in fact fascists. But that assumption is wrong. Okay, so some of them are fascists, some of them are white supremacists, sure. Right? Most of them aren't. You see Trump supporters getting pepper sprayed. Anyone wearing a MAGA hat getting kicked to the ground.
There was someone who had a "Make Bitcoin Great Again" hat that got...
Really? Just because they didn't read it properly?
Yeah, they couldn't read the word Bitcoin instead of...
Now, if you can't distinguish between an actual white supremacist and someone who votes Trump, and that isn't to say that white supremacists couldn't vote Trump. They could, and they might do. But just because you vote Trump, it doesn't follow that you're a white supremacist. That will still be a massive minority of the people who voted for Trump. Right? So... if you can't make that distinction, then you are politically and historically illiterate. And what's worse is if you can't make that distinction and you have that level of illiteracy and you've got a baseball bat and a mask. That's a dangerous combination, right?
Totally right.
You know, I mean, we saw with Andy Ngo, a bunch of white middle-class students in masks beating up a gay Vietnamese immigrant
in the name of tolerance.
In the name of tolerance and to stand up against white supremacy. Are you joking?
It's a Titania tweet.
So it's really funny and also horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible because...
Sorry, Andy.
He was hurt. He was injured. It was unjust. What they should have done... Now, obviously, all this stems from an article he wrote, or a couple of articles he wrote for Quillette. What you do in that case, if you disagree with the journalist, is you go up to them and say, oh, I disagree with this. Can we have a discussion about it? That's it. And as soon as you hit someone on the basis of they are... normalizing supremacist language or discourse, you over theorize to justify your own violent acts, and it can't be justified. And it's really, really sad that we've got to this point where this is happening.